We're back on Born B464, and we're with my buddy, Alan Schwarzwalder, and my new buddy, Opie Willis. And Opie, we're in your gorgeous garage here at the farm, and it's called what?
Horsepower Farm.
Horsepower Farm. And I can see why now it's called Horsepower Farm. You know, I wanted the cameraman to actually, with your instruction, talk about the first car that we sat in, Alan and I, and that's the one we're going to end up with. Talk about all the different cars and a little bit of the history of each car. Could you do that for us?
Oh, I don't know. I can try, but but the car Alan was sitting in is a '66 Cobra, and this is a 428 Cobra.
Okay.
So anyway, this is a '66 Cobra. It's got a 428 Super Cobra jet in it, 2 4-barrels. A lot of fun to drive. We let everybody drive our cars, and it's always exciting to see when people come back with a big smile on their face. We had a person last month at Cars and Coffee, and what was really interesting is he had this Chevrolet NASCAR jacket on. And he said, "Can I sit in that car and have my picture taken?" And they probably took me, I don't know, most of the morning to finally convince him to just go drive the car. And when he came back, the look on his face and the smile and everything was like I just wanted to ride in it. And I said, "No, you got to drive it. And then you'll know what it's really like." Mm-hmm. And I just think that's precious when people come back and with that smile on their face, and they just go, "Wow."
How old is the car originally? And
so this car is what's called an ERA, so it's a reproduction of the original Cobra, and this car was built around 1992.
Really? Yeah. Who owned it? Did you buy it?
I actually went to somebody's farmhouse. This is kind of an interesting story, but my wife and I were on a trip in Indonesia, and we'd just come back, and my neighbor said to me, "You know, there's a guy down the street, they're having an auction, and there's a Cobra for sale." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, that one you always keep looking to buy." I said, "I've never seen a Cobra around here, Al." And he said, "Well, let's go look." So the following Saturday, you know, I dropped my wife off someplace, and I was driving down the road, and I remembered that this auction was going on at this guy's house. And they were selling 2 items. They were selling the house and this car.
You didn't buy the house, though?
No, I didn't want the house.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I wanted the car. And I went there, and there was probably only 10 people there. And
10? That's it?
I ended up with the car.
Yeah. Wow.
So
let me ask this question. You have a collection here that's absolutely gorgeous. What's the one that's the oldest one that you have?
The oldest car we have is really not here, but that would be a '59 MGA Roadster. And then a friend of mine, Steve Barrett, owns the '29 Ford Roadster that's up here on the rack. So we actually went to do a car show this winter, and he was moving somebody's car, and as we were moving things around the garage to make things fit and get cars in the trailer, then I said, "Let's just put that thing up top and leave it." So I think he was happy because he had a place to store it for the winter. It doesn't look good in his front yard covered in snow.
Let me ask this question of you, and that is, what's the car right below it, Opie?
The one right below it is a '67 GTO convertible. And we've had this car, Sue and I, probably since '85, '86, right about when we first met. Actually, one of our first couple of dates that we ever went on, and I ended up getting this car. And this car was originally owned by Paul Brown and was given to his secretary. And the person that I bought it from was actually his mom, and this lady were best friends, and she willed the car to him. And so he was selling this car to go buy a brand new Corvette, and that's how I ended up with that car.
Okay, let's go to the next section of cars, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, they all got a little bit of a story. So this is a '69 Mercury Cyclone, and we went down to, let me see, I think we bought this car at Mecum and Kissimmee. That's where this car came from. And it was at an auction, and I just saw this car, and I like unusual things. And anyway, I said, okay, it's worth about X amount of dollars to me. And my wife said, then just get it. And well, somebody outbid me by about $1,000. And my wife said, if you're not going to bid on it, I'm bidding on it and I'm buying it. So anyway, I bid one more time and we owned the car. And kind of a really unusual story about the car up top, which we don't even really drive. But I was getting my hair cut one day, and the lady that cuts my hair said to me, I know a guy that's got a pace car. I said, what kind of pace car? And he wants to sell it. I said, it's like a Corvette? She goes, no, I don't think it's a Corvette. So anyway, I called this guy up on the phone. He didn't answer. A little bit later, he called me back, and he said, you know, are you Opie? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, this is Carl. I said, Carl? And he said, yeah, I'm the guy with the pace car. I said, okay. So I said, tell me about your car, Carl. So he says, well, it's like brand new. I said, what's that mean? He said, well, it's only got 144 miles. No, 144. No, I asked him how many miles were on it. That's how it started. And he said, 144. And I said, 144. And he goes, yep. And I said, like 144? And he goes, yep. And then he came back and he said, well, I'm going to look at the speedometer. And when he came back, he goes, nope, it's 144.6. And I said, okay, I'll come take a look at it. So I came and took a look at it. He shot some crazy price that was really, really low compared, and I just bought it on the spot. And then I drove the car home, and the funniest thing about the story is a few months later he came to my house to see my cars before we bought the farm, and he was telling me I was crazy because I drove it over 10 miles. The guy had never driven the car over 10 miles
Let's
at one
talk
time.
about the next car, Opie. It's a Ford Mustang. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
so that's a Ford SVT Mustang, and that was bought from a little lady right down the street here that her husband passed away. It's sat in her garage. I went across country with a bunch of guys one time and in my GTO, and I went and bought that car, and for whatever reason, her son didn't want the car. And so I went and bought it, and that's been a fun car, but I've never really driven it that much. Down below is a 64 Nova, which is a really unique car. It's a factory. The first year that Chevrolet put a 283 in a Nova, and that's what this is. It's a factory 4-speed, really unusual 220 horsepower car. The car standing behind me is a 70 Torino 429 Cobra Jet called a J-Code car. And I competed in a concourse d'elegance in Lexington, Kentucky one year. And I competed against this car with the Cyclone that you just saw. And I really didn't know this car that well. And the next thing I know, a few years later, we were at Mecum. And once again, we weren't able to buy the car there at the auction because they had a reserve on it. And many months later, we ended up buying the car and adding that to our collection because we just like things that are all original and restored to perfection. So that's what we like. And down below here is a 1966 Griffith. This belongs to a friend of ours in Columbus, Ohio. And we've been going to work on the car, and we've done some things, but we took it to a car show, and now she wants a few things finished on it, and we're going to fix it up for her and then show this car at the Alt Park Concourse, which is the show that my wife is the director of. Up above is a car, 1969 W30 442. So that's a really nice car, and you can just see how nice they are on the bottom. All these cars are just as nice on the bottom as they are on the top. So, you know, we drive them. It's kind of a funny story. I bought that car, and I went to a car show one morning, and on the way home, it was pouring down rain, and I kept trying to call the guy that owned that car that I bought it from, and he restored it. And basically, he called me on Monday, and he said, I saw you called me 4 times. And I said, I just wanted you to know I was finally driving your car in the rain, because he never even put water on the car when he washed it. I mean, we drive our cars, so I kind of find that funny how people are. 1972 Pantera. Right here, and this was a car that Ford They were part owners with a company called De Tomosa, and they put 351 Ford Cleveland engines in them. And these cars, you know, are really a lot of fun. And, you know, so, you know, we try and keep everything as original as possible, and that's what we've done with that. This is a 1970 Corvette up here, 454, 390 horsepower car. And this is probably the first muscle car I bought, and that was in 1980. And that's about it, really. Oh, and then at the end of the garage, we have a brand new 2015 Dodge Hellcat, which most people know what that is. But you know, to buy technology today with 707 horsepower and a car that can go 200 miles an hour, I mean, that's kind of unheard of. And then off to the right here, we have this Ford-powered Indianapolis race car here. This was Al's first race car that he ever bought and he ever drove. And this car ran in the 1972 Indianapolis 500. And I think, Al, if I'm not mistaken, you ran this car over 200 miles an hour?
I don't think so. That's good.
Well, gentlemen, why don't you come back and join me at the table? We'll be right back after these messages with Opie and Alan Schwarzwalder, and we're just really having a lot of fun just with cars, right?
Absolutely.
Right. We'll be right back on Boring B464 after these important messages.